Hello, everyone. Hello, Antesa. So good to have you here. Thank you for coming. You are coming, joining us from India.
Yes.
Yes, and I'm going to first introduce you to the audience for anyone who might not be familiar with your work, and then I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Awesome.
Antesa Jensen is an emotional intelligence teacher who specializes in communication, relationship building, and learning to navigate the inner landscape. In her work, she focuses on the discernment between reactive behavior, feelings, and thoughts, and the cultivation of honest, kind, and compassionate communication styles that build relationship, including to oneself, and deepen intimacy, connection, and an intuitive sense of purpose in all areas of life. Her offerings are broad ranging and include keynotes, EQ workshops, and intensive transformational coaching, and expedition style intensives and location based coaching retreats. Through her company Adventure Awake, you can learn more at antesajansen.com. Yeah. Thank you again, Antesa, for coming to join us. Yeah,
Thank you for having me. Thank
yeah.
you for having me.
How are you spending your time in India? I know you're visiting. Is it related to your location-based intensive? Those are something I want to explore also. How do you do those location-based retreats? And is that what you're doing in India right now?
It is not what I'm doing in India. I have a spiritual, like a sangha, a community, and a guru. And our ashram is here in Rishikesh. And so I have been here for about 2.5 months now. And the first 3 or 4 weeks, I was doing seva, which is literally translated to selfless service. Our ashram is the foundation of actually Rishikesh. It was used to be the only thing here. And my guru's guru was a saint in India. People would travel very far to see him. And he passed away in 2011, and the ashram needed some work. And so many of us came early and we painted and we cleaned and we did construction jobs and also prepared for my guru to arrive, and got her house ready and that kind of thing. And then we were having satsang for a month. A satsang is a meeting of sharing deep truths. It's a really beautiful time to receive spiritual transmission, and otherwise just living in Laxmanjula Rishikesh, which is a totally other universe. um, and fortunately for me, I run my business mostly online. I do some in-person work as well, in addition to the location-based, but also teaching workshops with companies. And because the Wi-Fi is so great here now, I can stay for a long time and business as usual, which is really wonderful. Adventure Awake was my very first offering, quite hilariously. Like right when I was transitioning, I had a 12-year career in investment banking, doing IT financial management. And I was a very avid traveler for many, many years. I've been to over 50 countries, and I had personally experienced travel to be an incredibly transformational catalyst for change, for self-discovery and self-awareness, and had had some very extreme experiences while traveling that I later discovered had I had a coach with me while I was there, I would have saved myself a lot of time. And that was kind of the birth of Adventure Awake, was to go out into the world and have real life experiences on expedition, and bring a coach along with you, because often when you're removed from your mundane environment and you're not doing the same monotonous things day in and day out, you start to consider things that maybe you'd never seen before. You interact with water, food, culture, experiences that give you another perspective. And when it's alive and you're in the experience, it's a really prime time to shift perspectives, make changes in your life, And I really did that in my own life, and I wanted to be able to offer that to other people. So that is one of the many ways that I work with people is on location. Most recently in Mongolia last summer. That was my second trip to Mongolia, and it's wonderful. And I go with longtime clients. Now I used to take people that I had never met before, but there are challenges associated with doing that kind of deep work with perfect strangers. That has it be that now I take people who have been longtime clients. Seems kind of obvious, but for a young coach, I really thought, oh, this won't be a problem at all, but it is not always so easy to build that relationship when you're already in the uncomfortable situation.
How
Um,
large are the groups?
Very small, usually minimum 3 people
Mm-hmm.
and maximum 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
So it's usually quite an intimate experience.
Beautiful.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they're really fun. I also do retreats. I have one coming up in France this spring for my emergence clients. So I have an ongoing coaching group, both for men and for women. They're separate and then come together every 3 months for a group call. And we're having our first in-person retreat after 5 years. So many of these people have kind of known each other for quite a long time, and now they get to meet in person, which I'm really excited about. And we'll be in the Pyrenees for that.
Wow,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Sounds wonderful. Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I
Yeah.
feel very blessed. I have created a very we kind of talked about this as we were getting to know each other on our last call. My story really resonates with what you're creating here, because I very much burned out, had a full-on existential crisis, and had no idea where I was going to go from there because I thought my destiny was to work in financial management, hilariously. And um, yeah, I had to build my entire life from scratch because of that and the awakenings that I experienced in that. And I'm very, very blessed that I have, over years, it has not been easy, but have built a life that is exactly right sized for me, where I can work from anywhere. I have the possibility to work in person with people where it's relevant, and take care of myself in a way that is not totally destructive to my nervous system. And I was just saying this to a client the other day that my entire life is self-care now, but I remember the time where the opposite was true. And I had no idea where my energy leaks were and how I was living. And I had no idea that the life that I'm living now was even available. It was so far away from where I was. And I'm infinitely grateful to the mentors that I had that ushered me in such a way that I could discover for myself what that was. And as is very common, I think I felt very inspired to be that person for other people because I see so many people burning the wick at both ends and just being running on fumes and not having any idea that that's actually what's happening, which is, I think, perhaps the most dangerous of all is when you don't know that you are on the verge of breakdown, and have no tools to know what that looks like. And those are the tools that I teach
Mhm.
now because it can be avoided. So
Yes.
yeah.
And that's exactly where emotional intelligence comes in, I guess, because it's the first step into making the shift. Is it is,
Yes.
is it the your community of your sangha and your guru that ushered you, as you mentioned, into this, or is this is a separate
No,
area where you had other
totally separate.
mentors? Yes.
I mean, my existential crisis turned into a spiritual awakening. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way for everybody, but I am a very deeply spiritual person. I would say that I've kind of always been on a spiritual path in my life, always kind of looking for God everywhere, in travel, in life experiences, in relationship, all of it. So that's a very personal to Antesa thing. My guru is my spiritual teacher. She's my mirror. She's I'm developing and spiritually maturing with her. And I was doing this work before I met her, actually. But my time with her has absolutely refined how I approach and how I work with people. But I had years of mentorship and training and life experiences prior to that actually that had me see that I do believe that although people may not always be aware of it, most people are ultimately looking for spiritual evolution in their human experience. Some people don't believe that that's true, but it doesn't mean that it's not true. It just means that that's not where they're looking. Um, and my experience, because of the different personal development communities that I've been in my life, shows me that it is possible to spiritually evolve from emotional immaturity and psychological immaturity, but it can be very, very dangerous. And there are many examples of that actually out in the world of people who are very emotionally immature, but who have access to light and who are self-proclaimed gurus causing a lot of damage in the world and misguiding people. And what I have discovered is that when a person is emotionally mature, spiritual evolution is actually quite effortless because you have integrated the basic principles of what it means to be a sovereign, responsible adult, um, without that being a bad thing to say. Like I think people don't like the word responsible, and being an adult kind of can get misconstrued. And um, but yeah, I think that it's possible to have a lot of spiritual power and not be responsible for it, and actually being emotionally mature, which is what emotional intelligence brings us. Um, has the person be responsible with their power, and integrity is really important for me. And um, I also have seen people go into sort of breakdowns and psychosis as a result of having spiritual experiences that they are not emotionally ready to have yet or psychologically ready to have yet. That's very common actually in the meditation world and vipassanas and kundalini yoga, where people awaken an energy in themselves and they actually are still operating from a very dysfunctional place, but they don't know that they are, sometimes because their community itself is dysfunctional. And it can create a lot of trauma. It can create a lot of problems. It can create a lot of abusive situations. And so I feel very strongly to be in the world in such a way that that can be prevented. And also, I work with a lot of people who are recovering from those types of experiences, not surprisingly, because, cults abound. And, that's just one
Yeah.
of the experiences that's out there when someone starts looking outside of the mainstream life for answers to their stress and to their relationship challenges or their relationship with themselves. So I like people to be in informed consent about what they're doing, and you can't really be in informed consent until you are emotionally mature. So that's why emotional intelligence for me, it's the crux of all of it. And I have clients who are just at the beginning of their journeys and are learning really important boundaries and how to express their needs and how to know when they're stressed out and when they're in a reactive state. And I have other people who are really immature and are really looking for their relationship to God and their soul journey and their lives and everything in between. And they all come together, and it's kind of like a dojo environment in that way where um, they all get to have that same playing field to learn and grow in, because when you're really mature, there's no such thing as superior or inferior. There's just learning, um, and that is the space that I like to create in my programs and the work that I do and what I offer. So
Beautifully
yeah,
said. Yes, thank you.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're welcome.
I
So go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, yeah, please go ahead.
So yeah, so when I talk about emotional intelligence, often people are like, okay, well, what is that? And for me, a big piece of emotional intelligence is emotional literacy. And I'm a big language person. I am a Gemini with a Virgo rising. I like words. I think communication is so important, and I think that intimacy can be squandered when communication is really poor. And I also personally experienced in my life that I thought I was a good communicator and actually I wasn't. And learning proper communication skills is vital, particularly when you get to the place where there aren't words for an experience and you need to still be able to feel the experience. And so for me, that is emotional literacy. That's being able to communicate boundaries. That's being able to say yes and no when you mean yes or no. Um, Knowing what your needs are and being able to take action on them. Um, Knowing what your basic human rights are so that you can be in healthy relationships. And from emotional literacy, you build what I call emotional sobriety, to be sober emotionally. And that is really the ability, this is the spiritual story of learning how to observe your experience rather than be governed by it. So that you can have the wave and you don't need to identify with it. You don't need to make it mean something um, terrible or wonderful, even. It's just a neutral, super straight line in that sense. And then you have emotional maturity from there. And that for me builds the foundation for self mastery. And I'm a big fan of self mastery. I don't think that there's ever really an arrival of that, but when your emotional waters are smooth, you can hear your intuition, you can act accordingly, you make choices that are correct for you, regardless of what everybody else around you thinks. You manage your energy really well. And as I said to you earlier, energetic hygiene is so key in this. And when you're working towards self mastery, you're really working towards optimal utilization of your energy in all moments of your life and your day and your relationships and the experiences that you have. This is a very long game, what we're talking about. There isn't a quick turnaround to this. It is a self discovery journey that has it be that every step that you take on your way is moving you closer and closer to being in alignment with what you are here to do for you, and being in, following your design, as it were, and doing life the way that you are here to do, not the way that someone else told you you should. And the number one cause of burnout is attempting to live in a way that is not for you. So this is where you and I align really well and easily. Um, and yeah, it's my jam.
So a few things that I'd like to touch upon. Energetic hygiene, we can go deeper into that.
Yeah.
Communication skills, I would love to hear, like, are we talking, I know that you do some of the nonviolent communication skills, and what other communication skill methods do you use maybe? And also, it's because I don't want to forget. I want to open the idea with you about this. You said something in relation to everyone doing pursuing their spiritual growth, even though they might be doing it somewhere other than the spiritual growth areas, which
Yeah.
to me relates to corresponds to after 40, everything is spiritual, you know. After 40, everything is spiritual. Whatever
Hmm.
it is, washing the dishes is, and doing the laundry is, and talking to friends and everything else. And
Right.
so the thing that I personally observe that it's an obstacle for this is the scienticism that I'm seeing so uh, widely and deeply. Science has become our new God, right?
Hmm.
If we can prove it with,
Yeah.
and you and I know that, and everybody knows pretty much. I think, in some level, in any case, that science is just hardly catching up, really, to the ancient teachings of the
Right.
Rishi, right? They're not really catching up, but it's at least coming closer to this direction now.
Yeah, they're finally proving things that were written in the Vedas 5,000 years ago.
Right. Right, and they are not
Yeah,
able to prove the actual essence of it at all because
right.
it's not that. Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about what is devotion to you. How would you define devotion and in relation also to scientificism? And then I really want to go to energetic hygiene also because I think they are related, very related. How do
Absolutely.
we regulate our emotional life and our reactive self? How do we know if where we're putting our direction? Because this comes down to me as a basic sense of drivenness. It's we have as
Yeah.
workaholics, work martyrs, hypervigilance, burnout. These things are coming from a bright, bright spark that is
Mhm.
so powerful. We have such a drive, and we have lost our direction as to where to direct this light.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I gave you a lot to go on now. I
Okay, I'm
hope
going to leave
I
it up
wasn't
to you to make sure
stumbling
that we
too much.
check all of those questions.
Yeah.
Those are really good questions. I don't think that I've ever been asked what is devotion before, but I have certainly considered it, and I love that I would like to lead with that. Um, Once upon a time, I was looking at this very clearly, like what is the spiritual path versus the scientific path. And on a very superficial level, science is dualistic. And people who are looking for God are usually moving towards a non-dualistic way of um, of operating in the world and of thinking as well. Um, on one level, science is, proving things to be true or false, which puts it into a very binary context. And um, uh, Niels Bohr, I think, is the person who quoted this, is that um, the opposite of true is false, and the opposite of a profound truth is often another profound truth. And he was a physicist um, from Denmark, incidentally. And I really like this quote because when I look at science, I love science. I refer to it often. I use it a lot. And when I had to do my TED talk, this is actually kind of where things got really fun for me. I did a TEDx talk in Chicago back in 2019. And it's really well known when you do a TED talk that if you don't have scientific proof for the claims that you're making, that they will flag your talk as pseudoscience and down prioritize it, and they will never share it on their website. And I knew that what I was bringing was a profound enough conversation that if I didn't come with science, I was definitely going to get flagged. The long story short is that I got flagged even though I came in with tons of facts about what it was that I was saying. But one of the things that I learned while I was researching for that talk was that actually physicists are amongst the most spiritual scientists. Because when you get to the level of physics, everything is spiritual. And when you're dealing with chemistry and biology as two examples, you're dealing with the material world, and it is scientifically proven that the dense matter makes up a fraction of a percent of what actually exists in reality. That is science. Like you can't actually measure something that isn't in physical form. And what is now known in physics is that you can't measure things that we don't know about with tools that we do know about. And so about 96% of what exists in the universe, we have no clue and we don't know how to measure it. And as a result of us not being able to measure it, we can't see it either. We just know that 96% goes unaccounted for because there are certain types of feedback that we can get that there's something there. We just don't know what it is. And for me, this is like the direct correlation to spirituality. And what puts me into a state of devotion is that it's a great mystery. 96% of what exists for us is a mystery. And this is for me what God is. God is a mystery. It can't be proven. It can't be spoken about. Like, it defies that realm so completely. It is indescribable what exists in the universe. Even if we can experience it, to put it into words is ultimately to put it into in the intellect, to put it into binary thinking, to put it into dualistic thought. And you almost invalidate and negate the experience by attempting to do so. It completely dilutes what the direct experience of the thing. And people have been trying for millennia to give language to what is out there unsuccessfully. And even in the ancient scriptures, mostly what you're receiving are keys for how to have direct experience, not descriptions of what direct experience is. It's a treasure map. You know, the Bible is a treasure map, the Torah is a treasure map, the Vedas are a treasure map. All of it is really metaphor to get you into a state of being such that you can experience something which does not have language. And for me, that puts me into a state of devotion and awe, because what a wonder that, for all I know, that's only 44% of what's really out there. And all that I don't know is the vast majority of my experience. And I remember the time in my life where I was going over the threshold from living in the known world where I was looking for answers to my questions, to moving into the unknown world where every question led to another question, led to inquiry, contemplation, self-discovery, and direct experience. And it was an uncertain time, not surprisingly, because I wasn't confident yet in being uncertain. Because we live in the information era where your value is on knowledge and intellect and in information. Information is for free now. And as a result, we think that the fastest one to deliver the information is the most valuable. And I just can't say how wrong that is. And this was actually one of the things that I asked of the audience in my TED Talk years ago. And I wrote that TED Talk from a meditation. I channeled the content, and I had no idea why it was that I needed to speak about what happens in the silent place. And I used the metaphor of the grand pause in music theory and in music to describe the reverberation that has in silence, that can only be experienced in silence, that is filled with information that cannot be translated into words, but which will radically change your life. And this, for me, ties into energetic hygiene very directly, and why, as a deeply spiritual person, the thing that I lead with is emotional intelligence, which in a way is kind of a mainstream concept these days. But it's because I believe that most people are actually, they want that direct experience, but the fear of being out of control or the fear of the unknown keeps them from having it. And when you start to address that in a person and show them where they are in a suboptimal use of their energy because those fears are governing their lives, they very effortlessly start moving into these experiences, and the awe and the wonder and the devotion and the serenity that comes very quickly from that will then be the driver that has a person propelled forward on their journey without the need for validation from everyone around them. So it creates a sovereignty without it having to be manufactured. And that is my experience. This isn't something that someone told me. It is what I directly experienced on my own journey. So I know it must be true because I experienced it. Is it available for everyone? I don't know. But I have definitely seen other people have similar experiences when they move in this way. And so that is kind of where I encourage people to look. And for me, devotion is everything. Devotion is synonymous with prayer. It's synonymous with presence. It's synonymous with listening. It's synonymous with also focus. And there is a good old fashioned saying of where your attention goes, energy flows. You've probably heard that one too. And when we talk about devotion, it's about being disciplined in your focus. Where are
Yeah.
you choosing to look? You know, and when you're choosing to look at God, that includes everything actually, but it's not getting hyper fixated on the distractions that can actually make you lose faith, and cease to be devoted in your way. And devotion looks a million different ways. There are people who are in very obvious spiritual paths. In fact, I know a lot of women who are in their mid 50s, postmenopausal women, who have, as you said, in their 40s, kind of just realize that everything is God. You know, like I don't know what it is about being a woman. I'm also in my 40s. It's just duh, you know. But there are a lot of men who don't have that experience in their 40s. And I know a lot of women who are married to men who are not spiritual at all. And they are incredibly spiritual. And for them, it was just obvious. But when you really look into their relationships with their partners who are not talking about God and who are not exploring prayer and who are not exploring yoga or other types of practices, spiritual practices, their husbands are actually incredibly devotional in their own way. They just don't call it the same thing. And that's what allows their marriage to continue. You know, it's not, they're not actually on that far of a different track. They just are using different language, and there's an appreciation for the differences in that experience. So for me, devotion isn't necessarily religious or, you know, explicit in one way. You can be devotional when you do the dishes. You can be devotional when you drop your kids off at school. You can be devotional when you take a shower and wash your hair, when you put your makeup on. It's like a ritual of self-care, really. If that is where your intention is. It has to do with your focus. It has to do with your intention and where your attention is, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Please go on.
So I have your questions in my mind. So how does that pertain to energetic hygiene?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I will plug in into here that devotion as a descript a definement of it that I like so much. Like you said, where attention goes where it's, how did you put it? Attention goes
Energy goes where your
where
attention flows.
attention flows, and you
Yeah.
become what you meditate on. You become what
Yes.
you meditate on, and
What you repeat in your head, even if you're not, you may not be meditating, but you may be repeating a thought, and that is what you will see because that's what you're
yes,
repeating.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
that you are becoming what we could say it instead of meditating. I mean, meditating has also, we might want to open what it means to us also. And devotion is the drive and the pull towards that which is most sublime and beautiful.
Hmm.
And I think work is such a large area in our lives that we might, I mean, yeah, we can bring it all the way down to work. We can bring it down to cars, and you could be devotional to, it's a choice to be, we're directing that attention to something or another, to one direction or another. So that's,
Yeah.
yeah, again, that's where the energy leaks and the energetic hygiene becomes key.
Yes. So one of the things that I talk about a lot, and I think it's such a relevant conversation here, has to do with energetic hygiene. And where I like to start this conversation is that most people think that they are operating with 100% of their energy availability every day. So, like, you'll hear people say, I'm giving you 100%, or I want to put 100% into this, or I'm here 100%, blah, blah, blah. And
We don't
9.9
even know
times out
what
of
that is.
10,
We
yeah,
don't
it's
even know
just a
what that
figure.
is, what our
Exactly.
potential is.
It's a figure of speech because people really don't know what it's like to give 100%.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why um, I went so deeply into this is that I always could tell when someone wasn't giving me their undivided attention. I could always tell, even when I was a little kid. And I had a very obnoxious way of reacting to that when I was a child. But I remember being a young adult and wanting undivided attention, not knowing how to get it, not knowing how to necessarily provide it, but mostly feeling the impact of not having someone's presence and having that be my driving force for really going into inquiry about what is it that made a person present and what detracted from a person's presence. And if you want to have direct experience of the divine, you need to be present. And people think they're present, but they're really not. And the reason is that you can have a lot of unconscious material occupying your energy without you even realizing, because it's been happening your entire life and you don't know another way. And it occurred to me a few years ago that probably one of the most often not talked about privileges in life, like, we talk about white privilege, we talk about male privilege, we talk about Western world privilege, that word privilege. Um, One that's not talked about ever is emotional intelligence and emotional maturity privilege. Having been raised in a healthy family, having been raised in an emotionally mature family is incredibly rare. So you can be raised in a family with really smart people. You can be raised in a family with really wealthy people. But to be raised in a family where there's psychological and emotional safety and where the interactions are mature or at least are moving towards maturity, even when they go into maybe immature places. I don't know a single person who was raised in an environment like that. I know people who were raised with prosperity. I know people who were raised with very smart and intelligent parents, professors, financially successful, professionally successful families. But when you really dig into it, there may not have been explicit trauma, but there was almost always some kind of unhealthy behavior, codependency, dysfunction. Codependency is the most common one, I would say. And when that has been your normal your entire life, you just think that this is normal. You think that this is how you're supposed to relate. And usually, because this is your normal, you're attracted to people who also think it's your normal. And so you can't see the forest for the trees. You have no idea that you're running a program, as it were, that is draining you of energy, that is preventing you from being present because nobody is operating from a sovereign and authentic place in your environment. And you don't even know to look for it. And the only way that you would find this out is if you happen to be blessed to interact with someone who's healthy and they're willing to stick around long enough, which is uncommon, by the way. Unhealthy people don't hang out with dysfunctional people. These people never cross paths, usually. More and more, we're in a world now where healthy people are offering their services to unhealthy people so that they can become healthy, but then you need to pay to learn, or you're lucky and you can not lucky, you end up in a fellowship like a step work program and you learn the dysfunctions of addictive behavior, for example. But in daily life, unless it becomes a problem, you wouldn't even know that it was a problem. You wouldn't even know that you were interacting with a healthy person. The healthy person's going to see the dysfunctional behavior and they're not, the healthy response is to not engage. Healthy people don't attempt to fix unhealthy people, for example. And so these people are living in alternate paradigms. They're living the same way. Their lives look in many ways the exact same way, but one person is healthy and one person is not. And the healthy person has access to 100% of their energy and awareness of their energy. And when I say that how rare this is, like I know less than 5 people who are precise in this area of their lives because it just it's not an easy thing to accomplish. And most of us were not raised with this education.
Almost all of
And
us. And if we have one person like that, then we can know the difference, right? If we
exactly,
know
right.
one person, then we're like, oh my goodness, I'm operating on 3% here. And then
Yes,
you tune your fork of your body to their fork and become
exactly.
and start getting, you can
Yeah, you get
find
the light beams off of their
right.
beacon and they become a lighthouse for you. And it's almost actually natural. The healthy person doesn't really have to do anything, but if they're willing to hang out while another person is learning and finding their way, And, for me, for example, I didn't grow up healthy. I grew up incredibly dysfunctional. I had a very, very severely toxic family life. I had no idea what was available to me. I hired a person who also had that situation, had become healthy, and learned everything that I could from her. And many of us who have this experience of coming into a healthy and mature way of relating, we feel a sense of duty to offer that to other people because it's so liberating. And when you realize that what you thought was your 100% is actually closer to 30 or 40, and that you've been running on fumes and you've been on the verge of not just breakdown, but disease and life-threatening illness as a result of this lack of self-awareness, you feel a responsibility to give people what the tools that they need. And frankly, if I didn't have a mortgage to pay, I would do this for free because it's so important. And I do. I mean, I talk about this with everyone that I meet because I care a lot about it. And such simple information can be life altering. And that's why I'm here with you today. Like, I mean, I don't get paid to do summits. I show up for these because for me, it matters that people know that the information that they were given is not correct and that they are given an opportunity to look elsewhere and actually get in tune with themselves. You use this analogy, I use this as well, is to find out what your pitch is and learn how to play it, like, and if you don't know that you're singing out of tune and you're matching pitch with a sick environment, which is really true now, especially in more of the Western countries, United States for sure.
Yeah.
You're at much higher risk of really, really bad challenges. I mean, most people find out that they're stressed because they get a cancer diagnosis, not because they're actually stressed in the United States. Like in Denmark, I moved to Denmark about 13 years ago, and it was novel to me that people go down with stress. They go on stress leave. That was not a way of talking about stress that I had ever heard in my life until I moved to Denmark. And there you're in a social welfare system. And so the government pays for you to see a psychologist and to rest. And frankly, it doesn't resolve the stress issue for Danes because Danes don't have globally a very high level of emotional intelligence. They rely on their intellectual resources, and so they go down with stress, but they don't necessarily know how to avoid it from happening other than to not do the job that they're doing, for example, or to not have a life that they've created. And that can be really challenging for anyone as well. And so this is why emotional intelligence training is so important, is that you might need to rethink how you've built your life. And that will rub up against your identity and your idea about what it means to be successful. And that can create its own existential crisis. And nobody does that alone, in my experience. Everybody needs support. It is a big task. And to attempt to do that in your own isolated chamber is a death sentence. I mean, you wouldn't be successful. You need a mirror, you need people who are showing you the way. And there are lots of free resources and lots of reasonably priced resources for getting this awareness.
I wanted
But
to get,
people, go
sorry.
ahead, go ahead,
Mm.
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I wanted to get into so many more things like you talk about willpower, which is another area I wanted to get into. And now we have almost no time left, so we're gonna need to I heard the word duty, which kind of is
Yeah,
within all this illness area where we don't know that we're not, where we don't even know what's going on the treadmill. It's like it's past and forward, and the direction is not where we want it to go. So we need to make a switch in our direction so that we can fulfill and get sovereignty. All of this. I think duty becomes another key word for this kind of workaholism,
yes,
this kind of drive that is not coming from a natural source, but from programming, basically. Um,
yeah,
because we feel the duty, we have the brightness, we have the, source within us to go with this drive. And then, yeah, I want to bring this duty together with play mind, because the play
Yes.
mind to me becomes just the word with no other meaning before associated, even just the word play
Mm,
mind. It brings a resonance, a different resonance, to be able
yeah.
to start doing something without overwhelm.
Right.
Because even the situation that we're in, which is maybe dreadfully busy and exhausted, burnt out, and we don't know where to turn, even, however drastic it may be, or however subtle also it may be, the burnout. Uh,
Mm,
by putting the attention on the fact that this also is play, this also is my play mind. There is something in me that wanted this, that needed this. And I made too many choices. This is where I end up. But this also is empty. It's not solid and real as much as I'm hallucinating it to be. Something
yeah.
like that. How can we bring this back to play mind, and how would you like to bring it, this play mind, with what you do, that we can, that will have to be my last question.
Yeah.
Yes.
In the Vedic teachings, the word dharma means duty.
Ah,
And there's a very people have probably heard the word dharma and not really known what dharma means. Um,
I have
there
some quotes in here on Tessa, because you're gonna, I think, enjoy this, and I hope everyone too. In my sangha, dharma means a lifetime of practice.
which is
A
your
lifetime.
duty. It's your spiritual duty, you know? And it is people hear the word duty and they hear responsibility and they hear responsibility and they hear burden and obligation. And spiritual duty is actually to be in the world like a child. It's to embrace your innocence. It's to live in a state of awe and wonder and serenity. And that is what it means to be spiritually evolved and to have realized your true nature is this innocence. And, there's a real purity and a real levity to it. They say enlightenment, it's not just about being a bright light, it's actually about energetically being really light. And play is to be light. And if you want to transform your life, you better have a sense of humor. You better be able to play. You better be able to operate in your life like a researcher, to use science, to go back to that from the very beginning. One of the things I love about science is that intrinsically, like, you have to start with curiosity. You have to start with play. You have to start with your little research hats on. You come in with a hypothesis and you create a conclusion. And this is actually where science goes a little bit, because people see conclusions as black and white, but actually a lot of science that was proved one way before is proved another way before this. And eggs were once good for you, and then they're terrible for you, and then they're really excellent for you, and then they're only good for you in this particular form. And like, this is just how things operate. And if you don't have a sense of humor and an ability to play and be light with your way of interacting with your life, that's actually a really good place to start. And there's this book. I actually had a friend who once said, I'm not sure anybody ever reads the full book because actually the title has a strong enough transmission that you like don't really need to read the whole book. But it's called Finite and Infinite Games. Have you heard of this book?
No, I haven't. Finite and
The,
infinite game.
yeah, and the basic principle is that we live in the world and we're operating on a subset of rules. And when we have a subset of rules and everybody agrees on the rules are you're playing a finite game where there's a winner and a loser at the end. And in the real world, everybody doesn't agree on the rules, and there is no such thing as winning and losing. And actually, the point of the game is to keep the game in play. It's an infinite game. And so I call this, my version of this is to cease conclusive thinking. There is no end. Even when a relationship ends in divorce, that's not an end to the relationship. It's a change in form of the relationship. Anybody who gets divorced with children knows that the relationship doesn't actually end. But even if you don't have children, the tendrils of that relationship, the teachings that came from that relationship, they live on. I have a relationship that ended 12 years ago. I'm still getting things from that relationship. I haven't seen the guy in 12 years. Like there is no ending. And when you can start, this is such a key mindset tool to actually think about, what can I do? How can I think? How can I behave? How can I intend for my life in such a way that the game always feels like it's staying in play and I don't ever tap out? Even when it's challenging, I don't tap out. Everything is for learning. Everything is for growth. Everything is ultimately, as you said, for me, for my growth, and for my enlightening, for my play mind, to use your terminology. It's so important. And I think where things get really challenging, speaking of the word duty, is that people take that and they make it really heavy. I have a duty, I have a responsibility to my children, to my wife, to my job, to my parents and their expectations of me. And it's very freeing when you eventually realize that people are going to have their expectations and you don't have a responsibility to live up to anybody else's expectations other than your own. And what do you expect of yourself? And is that reasonable given the body that you're in, given the life circumstances that you have? And are you having a good time? Because life is certainly not for suffering. And a lot of people have that confused. And I will segue this into one of the things that we were going to talk about. How much time do we have left? Like 5 minutes?
Yeah,
How quick,
we
how
don't
quick
have
do I need to
much
move?
time, but I want you to tell us about your free gift, and we have to, and then yes, please.
Okay. So my free gift is called How to Radically Change Your Life. And why did I write that? Because I know a lot of people who want to radically change their lives and they don't know how. They don't know what is actually required. And there's a lot of garbage on the internet, forgive me for saying so, of people who want you to buy really expensive products and they give you the 5-step tools to getting 6-figure income or whatever it is. And money can't buy love. We all know that one. And um, I'm not a content creator. I'm not a marketer, but I happen to know what it's like to radically change your life. I have done it multiple times. I have purged 70% of my life and moved on with 30. I have purged 100% of my life and moved on with 0. I know what is required, and I have distilled it down to 3 core things: willingness, not willpower, but willingness; receptivity. To me, receptivity is to neither believe nor disbelieve, to neither agree nor disagree. It's to be open like space. That is my definition of receptivity. And how fast, how easily can you receive? And that will define the efficiency of your trajectory, and the willingness will define how far you go. And then communication skills, some really important ones, like being willing to say the thing. It seems so simple, but for the number of times that I hear someone say, how do I say fill in the blank? And then I say, why don't you just say that? And they say, can I do that? And I'm like, well, of course you can, because that's the honest communication. And most people spend a lot of energy on trying to say things a very particular way in order to manufacture a very specific outcome in order to avoid the pain of the truth. And that is one of the biggest energy leaks out there. And most of us are raised in environments where that is the way to communicate. And so the best way to disrupt it is actually to say what you are actually experiencing and not sugarcoat at all. And another big one is to develop the emotional literacy by being able to identify and acknowledge how you feel in any given moment without interpreting it and making it mean something. So separating the ability to define from the physical sensation of your emotional body. this is a very, very liberating thing because when you no longer need to define how you feel, all of your emotional experience is totally intrinsically neutral. And oh gosh, suddenly I am having a rapid heart rate and my stomach is tense and my shoulders are slouched. And I don't have to make that mean anything other than what it is. And those things combined with receptivity and willingness will get you very far, and it's free. You don't actually need a lot other than to know that, like, you could work on being receptive for the rest of your life and you would go very, 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 very far. And that is something I break down, and it's a sort of it's not a workbook. It's kind of like a mini book, but it's about 40 pages, really breaking down how these things work, giving practical tools for ways to practice them. So everything I do, I like to put into very tangible format so that so it doesn't feel so inaccessible. I want it to feel really accessible for anyone. Um, and one of the places where I really teach that the most is in a program called The Unbound. And I do have kind of like a 5-step process to getting liberated with the duty that we're talking about that's heavy and moving towards the duty that's light. I love that you brought that into the conversation. We wouldn't have otherwise talked about it in that way. And it's so beautiful, is to really look at challenging relationships that you've had in your life, identify what the unmet needs were in those experiences, what the unexpressed emotional experiences were in those experiences, identifying language for things that maybe you may have never spoken about or ever allowed yourself to feel, learning to feel your feelings instead of just thinking them. And then learning how to take responsibility for your part of that dynamic so that you're not recreating it in other places in your life. Because usually we're recreating our dynamics with our siblings and parents in every other relationship, professional and personal, in our lives until we know to not. And that level of consciousness is huge. And that is, as I said to you, this isn't something that you can just walk a person through and it unlocks. I teach it in a 3-month journey. And I feel that that is incredibly rapid. And sometimes that can unlock huge things, but of course, it will open more doors. The spiritual journey doesn't have just one singular awakening. The emotional journey does not either. Often, when you have your first breakthrough, you see that there is just another door waiting behind that door for you to walk through. And it's, I would say, 10, 12-year journey is about fair for most people. To not have the expectation that you're going to have one aha moment and all of your problems will go away is a very healthy mindset to have. And that is one of the things that I teach a lot. It comes with my Unbound program and what I also speak a lot about in this free download that you'll be able to share with people. So I hope people will read it and write to me and tell me how they receive it and questions that they have. I love having that kind of connection with people who consume my content. Because for me, it's not content. It's not meant to be consumed. It's meant to open a conversation for something deeper. So,
Beautiful.
yeah.
I'm going to go get it. I hope everybody
Yay.
does too. Yes. Thank you, Antesa. Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for this
Thank you for this time together.
conversation. Yes, yes. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.